All right, guys, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a knowledge transfer or an educational topic, and I'm going to cover two perspectives. I'm going to cover how to identify GM parts and figure out what the part fits. And then I'm going to go over how to locate a GM part number when you're trying to figure out which part to buy. So something here for both sellers of parts as well as buyers of parts. The format and system I'm going to be describing started in the late 19-teens, heading into the 20s, so around 1916 up and through today, and probably for the foreseeable future. So a very large swath of time here. So first off, let's take a look at what you need to know if you're trying to identify a part. Let's say you got a part and you want to sell it. In order to figure out what it fits, you need to identify it, and you're going to need know four things. You need to know the brand that the part was originally intended for, whether it be a Chevrolet or a Pontiac or a Buick. GM organizes the parts by the brand or marquee. You're going to need to know the approximate era the part would originally service. So it might service multiple decades, but you need to know a decade where you know that part was available, let's say from the 1970s, so that you can zero in on the source for the information that's going to answer your question. And then the packaging of the part has to have two things legible: the GM group number and the GM part number. So with these four pieces of information, you'll be able to identify what the part fits and be able to sell it by being able to say, hey, I have a part that fits this year, this make, and this particular place on the vehicle. Now, if you're looking to buy a part, and this is what most folks, I think, watching this video would want to know, you're trying to fix your vehicle and you want to know what part you should buy. How do you figure out what number to order? And maybe you're not going to the dealer and you're buying the part off eBay, you're buying the part off Amazon, and the sellers there aren't going to be able to help you with what it fits. They just know they have this part with this number, and you need to figure out, is that what you need? You need four pieces of information for that path too. You still need to know the brand, because everything's organized by brand/marquee. So you need to know, I need a part for a Chevrolet. And you still need to know the approximate era that the part would have originally serviced. Or in your case, you know the exact year because you know the model year of the vehicle. So that's easy. So now you know the year and the marquee. You need to know the generic name that GM would have assigned that part. They know they need to call it a sensor. You need to know that they call it a motor, that they call it a panel. You need to know kind of like, what is this thing called? How do I reference it? And most importantly for this step, you need to be able to recognize the part visually within a parts explosion or a disassembly illustration, because you're going to need to be able to find it in the picture in order to get information that's going to lead you to where you can get the part number, which is what you're going to need to be able to purchase the part. So before we get into all this and how this works, let's just look at a brief history of how GM has communicated this information, this technical information. The very earliest, up until the early 90s, the only way you could do this was through hard copy printed catalogs, parts and accessories catalogs. In the earlier years, these might cover a single model year, but very quickly, as you get into the 1920s, they started covering a range of model years. And this section here that I'll cover is going to be good up through the 1993 model year. As far as I can tell from available information, 1993 was the last year that GM issued a printed hard copy parts catalog to their dealers. Not talking about service manuals. You can still get those hard copy today. I'm talking about parts catalogs. And then starting in April of 1983, microfiche replaced that. Now there's some overlap here. So, 83 through 93, there were overlaps. Obviously, smaller dealers would still keep using hard copy catalogs, and then larger, medium-sized dealers and large dealers would switch to microfiche. The microfiche system ran through the 2003 model year. So 2003, as far as I can tell with the available information out there, is the last year that GM released a microfiche for the parts for that particular vehicle. So microfiche was the exclusive media starting for model year 1994. So somebody who was on the catalog system was forced to upgrade to microfiche for that year in order to have the information they needed to provide warranty service. During this time, GM reproduced some older catalogs, like the last editions of catalogs covering the 60s and 70s, so that there would be full model year coverage for the dealership, so they didn't have to keep a mix of catalogs and microfiche. They could just have everything on microfiche that way, and that allowed them to get rid of all the catalogs that took up quite a lot of space and consumed a lot of labor time to use. The microfiche system was developed for General Motors by Bell & Howell. And then lastly, the EPC, or the Electronic Parts Catalog. Starting in very late 1987, and from everything I can tell, approximately right to the new millennium, there was this proprietary Bell & Howell IDB 2000 workstation that was out there. It basically was driven by illustrations. So you could look at an illustration, identify the part, pick it by visual reference, and then it would tell you the group and the part number for it, so you could order it. Very limited model year coverage, certainly nothing older. Only very current models were covered by this, and since it was something proprietary, you had this piece of hardware that sat in the dealership parts department, as well as a subscription to this back-end system. This is not anything those of you watching this video are going to come across. I'll see if I can find a picture of one of these workstations and pop it in up here as an inset in the upper right of the video, just so you can see what it looks like. And if one of you worked in a dealership back in the day with one of these, give us a comment below and tell us how these systems worked. But eventually, this proprietary system was replaced by an internet-based EPC, which is the same system the dealerships are using today. That started roughly around July of 2001. And that's what we run today. And both of these EPC systems were developed for GM by Bell & Howell. Now, you can find variations on these that were not official. For example, the printed hard copy catalog, you certainly will come across situations where very popular models like Corvettes and Firebirds and Camaros, for example, they've been reprinted. So they take the original catalog that's out of print for decades, and they go make a copy of that with GM licensing as an authorized reproduction of that catalog. And you can find those for sale on eBay and Amazon, and also car shows, that sort of thing. And then you also have people that just take the original catalogs and cut the spline off so that all the pages can be scanned in and make a PDF out of that. And that might either be hosted on a website today, or they might put that PDF on a CD-ROM, and you can view the catalog that way. But everything I'm going to tell you today applies to all that too, because it's still based on these hard copy printed catalogs. Nobody's reproducing the microfiche as far as I know, but you can certainly find used ones that have been sold off by dealers, or dealers that went out of business, that sort of thing, that were picked up at government auctions and that sort of thing. You can find those on eBay. And that's certainly a good reference to have, along with microfiche readers. Or, you can either do that, or some larger cities, the local libraries may still have a microfiche reader. These are quickly becoming extinct. And then on the EPC, I'll show you, this is typically something that's a dealership subscription, so it's not something you can get yourself, but I'll show you a couple of references that expose that EPC subscription externally that you can make use of, for however long they're up and running. And then past this, I'll show you a couple of other, examples unrelated to these three that are good references that can help you out online, and particularly in the idea of locating a part and figuring out what did it fit and how to position it for resale. Some of these might also be useful for finding a part for your vehicle, but not so much. So we're going to start with the physical printed copy type catalogs, and then I'm going to talk to you about how you can use the group system and how you can use it to locate the parts, how to work through the catalog and look at the illustrations, and then all of that information will also apply to the microfiche system. And then when we get through the EPC, which is going to be model year 2004 and up, because remember the microfiche covered through 2003, 2004 and up, the EPC is the only option, then I'll show you some examples of how to use that. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, folks, for showing an example of the hard copy catalog, I'm just going to use this 1929 to 1957 Chevrolet parts and accessories catalog. What I'm going to show you is going to be very similar for Pontiac, for GMC, for Cadillac, Buick, Oldsmobile. They're all going to be very similar. Same type of approach. When you look at the book, it's going to cover some range of years that it contains parts for. So this will be the oldest year that there'll be some parts for. This will be the newest year, and the newest year is typically the year of the initial printing. In the case of this one, March of 57. And then when you go inside one of these books, what's important to understand are these numbers here. These are called group numbers, and this is the high-level categorization of the parts. So at a high level, when you come into one of these GM books and you're looking for a part, and you know roughly what it is, like it's an engine part, for example, you know it's a transmission part. Well, you can see the transmission parts are all going to be in group 4. So you can go right to that section of the manual and to kind of zero in on what's in here. I'm going to show you some different examples and you'll get the hang of it. And this is going to apply to what we show in the microfiche section next. So let's say that I want to identify a part that I have. So I got a sample part here. Say I'm coming from the case of I got a part and I want to know what it fits. So this is an 1950s type packaging of a GM part, obviously discontinued, new old stock type item, NOS. But we can see that group number is printed right on top, 4.117. So that's group 4. It's a transmission part, so that makes sense. And it has the part number, 3727472, and a brief summary of what it is, trans-stator blade assembly. So let's go see what this fits. So to see what this fits, we would look up the group number inside the catalog here. So get into section 4, and then we'll find 4117. Let's see, 115, here we go, 117. So now we're in group 117, and you'll see a bunch of names, roller unit, cam, blade, seal, retainer, washer, pad, ring for the stator. And they'll all be organized that way. Well, we know we're looking for a blade, so we can look at all these capital pieces. See right there, there's blade. 3727472, that's our number. The quantity of what is required on the vehicle, there are 20 of these. This is actually part of the torque converter, and it's only for a 1957 passenger with turbo glide, at least in this year. It's possible the part was used in other models in later years, so that's the reason why you want to look in later years as well as earlier years to get a range. But that's how you'd identify what this fits. Now, what if I needed one of these? How would I find out what the number is if I needed one of these? Well, for that, you've got to stay in the same group, so you need to know that group 4 is transmission parts. And in the beginning of the section, there's going to be illustrations. So you've got to know a couple of things. You've got to know it's a Chevrolet, because this book isn't going to have any Buick parts in it. It's not going to have any Pontiac parts in it. It's going to only be Chevrolet parts. You're going to need to know the year, and you're going to need to know that you're looking for a transmission part. And then you can come back to these illustrations, and we can find the turbo glide. So this is all power glide, manuals, hydromatics for the trucks. Trucks. I might have started too early here. Here we go, turbo glide. And so now on the turbo glide part, I can come up here and I can see in this parts explosion of the torque converter, there's our blades, group 4.117. They're not showing them all together here of the 20, right? They're showing 10 here and then another 10 over here for the total of 20. So now I know go to group 4.117 and I'll find the part number for this blade, right? So that's the reverse way of doing it. Let's show a couple of other examples. Here's a later packaging part, Delco Rochester. So Rochester would have been the division that made carburetor parts and fuel-related items. Harrison would have been cooling and air conditioning, engine cooling, heating. There would have been Moraine for brake parts, and you would have found a number of these different things. Delco Appliance for motors and things like that. So here it's very similar. It's got the group number, 3.745, and a part number. It says 1 carburetor float assembly. So we already know it's a carburetor float because it's kind of obvious, but let's take a look at it. 3.745. We take a look in the book. We find section 3, just rough skimming until we find section 3. Now we're in section 3. We're looking for 745. 745, float gauge carburetor. We know we're looking for a float, so it's going to be the first listings that don't have anything. And looking for our number now, 7000-0273, says it's for 55 to 57, all 8-cylinder engines except those with a 4-barrel carburetor or dual 4-barrel carburetor. So this is a 2-barrel carburetor float. So similarly, if I wanted to get one of these, I would just go back and take a look at the illustrations. Now, in this case, maybe I don't have an illustration for a 2-barrel. And there may not be one in here, but that's if there wasn't, you would at least be able to find out the group, because you'd be able to see immediately that floats are in group 3.745 from any of these carburetors. This is a 55, and you'd be able to go in and identify the one for your model and particular body type. So what if you got an older part that doesn't have the group number? So some of these divisions didn't print that. Here's an old Harrison thermostat. This is a GM part. It's from Harrison division of GM. It's got a part number on it, but it doesn't have a group number. So, how do I identify what this fits? Well, there's two other things in the manual. One is I can come over here to an alphabetical index of part types, and I can use the index to find a thermostat. So I come through here and I look for, and again, all of this is going to apply for microfiche that comes later. Here's T's, S, T's. Trying to be careful with our vintage pages here. They're very fragile. Thermostat. Here we go. Thermostat. So we can see here that a thermostat, there's a number of different things, but a radiator thermostat is what we're looking for. Group 1.246. Okay. So now if I go to group 1.246, here's 1.27. We'll go back a little bit, and then the group numbers are at the bottom of the page too. 1.246 thermostat. Our number's 3133597, and we can see that that is all vehicles, including Corvette. So all passenger cars, trucks, and the Corvette for 170 degree thermostat, it's going to be this part number. And you only need one of them on the vehicle, and it cost a whopping $2.25 back in 1957. Well, there's another way to do this, and that's using the pictures too. So if we scroll back, we'd have to kind of get to the point where we know a little bit about the car, right? So group 1 isn't going to show this particular item because it is part of the engine. But if we go back to group 0 and we find the engine parts explosion, go too fast, you'll miss it. I'm sure that we'll find something that shows a picture of this thermostat. It's just a question of finding the right picture. All right, so now I'm in the, this is just a picture of a 6-cylinder. It doesn't matter. We just want to find out what group. We see a picture of a thermostat, and we can see it's in group 1.246. So we know to go immediately to that particular group to find a thermostat for our vehicle. The last one I'll show you is sometimes you get a situation where the part numbers are assemblies. So this big box here from Delco Appliance is a 1960s era box, but it's something for this same vintage. Just has a part number, 5047988. And there's no other markings on it. If you were to open it up, you'd find out that it's an electric windshield wiper motor. Well, again, we can consult our index, and we can look up motor. Motor. Here we go. Here's all of our motors. And we can come down and find the one for the windshield wiper right here, and we can see it's in group 10.150 and also in group 16064. So let's take a look at those two groups. So 10.150, way towards the back of the book. Okay, 10.146 to 151, so it should be here. Here's 10.150, motor and parts, windshield wiper. We do a quick scan here. We do not see this part, this 5047988. That's because it's part of an assembly, 3742846, which says it includes the motor, 5047988. So in this case, you got to do a little bit more reading of what's given to you as notes. Occasionally you'll see these notes as a footnote with an asterisk. And that's another way to identify something. The last thing I'll show you from the hard copy manual is what about handling situations where the part has changed, the part number has changed. In the back of the manuals, there'd be a parts history index. And what it'll do is it'll give you a part number, and it'll tell you the disposition and the date. So, for example, these parts have been removed. That's later on that jargon would be discontinued. In other cases, they've been replaced and superseded with another part that you can use. And then they give the date. And so this will go on for some time. As you get past the 1950s and into the late 1960s, these started to be printed as separate books, right? But all these different parts would be in here each time they released a manual, and they just cumulatively update this. So you can see there's quite a bit of activity. And you can just imagine in the days before computerization what was involved in keeping track of all this. So that you could be sure that parts that were discontinued were properly referenced and parts that were replaced had the correct number. And there does occasionally occur mistakes, but in general, they're fairly accurate. So now let's take a look at the microfiche era. Again, like we said earlier in the previous clip, the books only ran through around model year 1993. I'm pretty sure 1993, at least for Chevrolet, was the last year that a physical book was made available to the dealers. Prior to that, though, and overlapping with it, would have been microfiche. So let's take a look at microfiche. All right, so now let's talk about microfiche. So this is what replaced the physical books. Bell and Howell developed this for General Motors, and I think the first versions came out in 1983. So even though the program started in the 80s, there were still older books. So this is the 1946 to 1964 parts catalog. This parts catalog was printed in August of 1974. I'm not sure when it was put on microfiche, but it would not have been earlier than 1983. But if we take a look at this, right, we can see it's just a bunch of pages out of the physical book put onto microfilm. So if we put this into the microfiche reader, turn it on, and then we go up to the beginning, right here, get it in focus, you can see this is just like what we looked at earlier. This is the page for the 46 to 64 passenger book for Chevrolet. It'll give you the effective date of printing. In this case, it was August of 74, Chevrolet Motor Division down here at the bottom. And then over on the right, just like we saw in the hard copy book, here's all of our groups. So everything I already showed you, we don't have to cover again because it's already going to be in here. Right? Same kind of deal. And then the other thing, the only thing that won't be in here is a parts history, because that's going to be separate. I'll show you that in a minute. And then similarly, we can skip past the text information. There will be parts explosions, just like what you had in the other books. All right, so showing you some other examples of these books down here. So this is one I use to kind of bridge between the paper book and superseded numbers. Here's something similar for Pontiac. This covers through 1975. Here's a 76 to 81 Pontiac. And then here, for example, is the parts history catalog. And this covers all brands, 1982 through February of 2002. So if we take a look at one of these microfiches, and what we see in this is, so you'll see a title because this was actually a book. And this has been put onto microfilm before being sent out to the dealership. And then just like I showed you in the catalog, hopefully you can make it out here, but it's just a list of numbers and when they were either discontinued or if there's a superseded number, the new number to use instead of the discontinued number. So this is how you would get that information as a dealer in the microfiche era. The microfiche era, like I mentioned in the beginning clip, ran through model year 2003. That's the last model year that a microfiche would have been sent to the dealerships, but there's a lot of overlap. So like you could see earlier, if we come back down here, right, so we can get these older years covered before the microfiche system started, and you might be at a dealership where you've got the actual book from 46 to 64. I actually have that book and then this as well, and they're identical. But then at a certain point from 83 on, once you got past 93, you wouldn't have had anything but microfiche. So that's the two things you could see for the beginning generation. So this covers us from the beginning of General Motors all the way up to model year 2003. What do we do for model year 2004 onwards? Well, like we said in the beginning clip, that's the era of the EPC, or the electronic parts catalog. So let's take a look at that now. All right, let's take a look at the electronic parts catalog. Now, this is not going to be exactly the same as what your dealer's got. The back end is very likely the same, but the front end has been customized for monetization opportunities with these folks I'm going to show you. So this first one is from, I guess it's pronounced Partsouq, not really sure, PARTSOUQ.com. What's nice about this one is you could come down and try to drill in by the type of vehicle, but if you have the VIN, these guys will let you plug the VIN in and they'll take you right to where you need to go. This is just a 2008 Cobalt salvage vehicle VIN. It's got a 2.2 liter Ecotec in it. The L61 engine was produced on February 15th of 08. It's got a MN5 RPO 4-speed automatic, the 4T45E. And let's say, we wanted to order a part here. Well, you can see over here is all of our groups. Now, they don't have the group numbers like in the earlier catalogs, but they're all still here. We're sitting in group 0. Here's group 1. Here's group 2. Here's 3. These two are group 4. Here's 5. Right? Here's 6, 7. Right? So it's all still in here with the same system. And let's say we want to come in here and we need something from this intake manifold shield area. So we can pick on this and it'll populate it out. And let's just say we need this cap here. So that's reference number 1. We come over here. There's 1 and there's our number. 1258-9430. That's the oil fill cap. They tell you that it's printed SAE 5W30 vented. It includes the seal. So it includes part 2, which is this seal here. So you know that if you buy 1, you also get 2. So you don't need to order both. So you don't have to waste your money on that. And they tell you the AC Delco number is Frank Charlie 219, FC 219. Here's the group number, 1.758. It fits 05 to 08. Body style A with the L61 RPO engine, and you need 1 of them. So that's how you would buy the part. And it's going to be the same for all of that. So that's one EPC source. Here's another. This one's 7zap.com. Now, these guys won't let you do the VIN. If you come up here and you try to do the VIN, they're going to tell you that you need to pay extra for that. This is how they monetize the front end. So you're going to have to drill into it. That's no big deal. So we go into Cobalt, American, rather than the other places this vehicle was sold, the 2008. And the 4-cylinder engine section, now we have access to the same EPC. We can look at the illustrations, or if we happen to know where we're heading group-wise, we can drill into the group. But let's just drill into the illustration for consistency. We'll go in here, and kind of same deal. There's part 1. Now you can see they've obfuscated these numbers because they want you to click on this for a chance to sell it to you. But here's your number right here, and I tell you, well, you can pick it up at AliExpress, but don't necessarily recommend that particular vendor. But 1258-9430 is the number. So there's 2 EPC ways of getting access for free using the illustration guide. Now, certainly, if you find a vendor on here you're comfortable with, you should give these guys some business because they're putting this out there. I don't know how long it'll stay. I don't know if this is a GM authorized thing, but this is certainly the same kind of EPC that I can get access to as a business through a system called RepairLink. That's something you have to be a business, so I'm not going to show you that, but you have to be a business to have that, and that's how you purchase parts from GM wholesale. These would be retail, of course. Now, one other thing I'll show you to conclude our video. I mentioned in the beginning that you can get a situation with the hard copy catalogs where somebody may have cut the spline off and scanned them into a PDF. And a really great source for something like that is this site, gmpartswiki.com. And just taking a look at this, if I hit the browse button and I scroll down here in the browse, you can see all of the different catalogs that they've scanned in that you can reference and search for parts through So it starts all the way back. Let's see, the oldest one they have is 1941. And you can see, like, for example, here, this 1942 catalog covered 1929 to 1942. I don't know if you can make that out where the cursor is, but, that kind of a range is still there. And this goes all the way up through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And I just want to see, I think this is probably only going to go up to 93, just like any of the other sources I've mentioned. But you go all the way down. This is pretty comprehensive, but yeah, you can see the last catalogs available are in 1993. All right, you don't get anything newer than 1993. It's kind of oddball thing sticking here at the bottom that's miscategorized, but that is it. So that's a great way, if you don't have the actual catalog and you don't want to buy it, you can go into one of these and do the search the same way that I showed you earlier. I hope this information helps you in identifying parts and locating parts for General Motors vehicles. If you got questions or comments about what I've shown, leave it below and I'll try to help. If you found this useful and it helped you save some time in locating your part or being able to sell some parts you've had laying out in your garage for a long time, appreciate you paying it forward and hit that like button. And as always, thanks for watching.